The Joe Rogan Experience.
What we know, and I think actually we owe Trump a huge debt of gratitude for proving something that I couldn't have told you if it was true before he won the presidency, which is there still enough democracy left in the system for something to upend the plan? Right? Because he was clearly off narrative.
Right.
And he did become president. So he did something for us that I don't know anybody else who could have done it.
Yeah, it would take a person with that kind of personality that could withstand that kind of abuse. Because he didn't freak out at all when they went after him. He was like,
Right.
Just brushed it off like it was nothing. And no one's done that. He's also the only guy that's ever gone through 4 years and didn't age like he went through 30 years.
That's true.
He aged normal.
Yeah.
Like he's used to it. He's used to pressure. And Bush, he aged a ton. Obama aged a ton. Everybody aged a ton. Biden was already cooked before he got in, but he aged a ton. I mean, Biden from 2019 to today is a different person.
Yeah, and he was already visibly degraded, but wow, was it a precipitous decline.
Big jump now.
Yeah.
Trump was fine.
Yeah, Trump physically, and actually, I think he sounds better. I think, he drives me crazy sometimes when he talks, but I think he's getting better at it.
I think he's trying to be a little bit more reasonable, and try to appeal to more people because of that, that effort to be more reasonable. Like he's changed his mind about a lot of things. He's talking about legalizing marijuana. He's talking about all these different things that are like where, you're going to get a lot of different responses from like the hardcore Republicans are not going to be for that. Any idea of abortion, the hardcore right wing are not interested at all. And any restrictions on abortion at all, you get your hardcore left wing. So it's mostly the people in the middle. Abortion's a good one, right? Because most people are like, no one should be able to tell you what you could do with your body, but also aborting an 8-month-old fetus is kind of fucking insane.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing, and I've been saying this forever, is that almost everybody agrees on the basics on abortion. We're supposed to not be able to even talk about it.
Right.
But most people believe that abortion is negative, that if you've got a blastula, right, a clump of cells that doesn't yet have a nervous system, that you have the right to terminate that pregnancy, and that the farther you go through that pregnancy, the less right you have. And most people are incredibly queasy about it, I think, as they should be in the third trimester. And, that's what we agree on. And so it's really the extremists on both sides that we are up against. But to the question of what Trump is doing with an issue like this, I want to make a couple points. One, I think there are two issues that are getting tangled. One, I think he's politically going to some places that are not traditionally Republican, because I think he's destroyed the Republican Party. I just don't see the same Republican Party I remember at all. I see a different thing, and it's flying.
It's a MAGA party.
Yeah, it's a MAGA party. Right, exactly. And that's a very different thing because I see MAGA as mostly the labor faction that was cut loose by the Democrats in the Clinton administration. And so they've now found a home under MAGA.
Interesting. Right? Like, because blue-collar people were generally union people, which were generally Democrats.
Totally. And then Clinton turned the Democratic Party into a second corporate party so that those people were homeless. And then Trump picked them up as MAGA, and they're now under the Republican banner. But it doesn't read like the Republican Party at all to me. And now it's picked up I don't want to say technocratic, that's dismissive, but it's got this Silicon Valley component to it.
Yes, that's recent.
Yep.
That's recent
as of
over the last
convention.
year.
Yep.
Yeah. It is interesting, right? Because we did, growing up, always associate unions and blue-collar people with voting Democrat, because Democrats were looking out for the middle class, looking out for people's best interests, supporting unions and fair wages and funding schools and all that kind of stuff, keeping neighborhoods safe. And Republicans were more like small government, fuck you, figure it out, I don't want to pay taxes.
Yeah, stingy.
And they were the ones that are encouraging war.
Yep.
Which is crazy today, that you have this massive 180-degree shift. And the Democrats are talking about how important it is that we keep funding Ukraine and that, we have some sort of whether you're pro-Hamas or pro-Palestine, I should say, or whether you're pro-Israel, there's involvement in that. No one is saying, no Democrats are saying we need to get the fuck out of there.
Right.
They're saying we need to free Palestine. Oh, okay. How are you going to do that? How are you going to do that? How much is involved in that? Are you going to bring in people? You're going to send people there? Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to kill people for this? What are we doing? The Democrats you guys are looking for war. You're not looking for peaceful solutions. Like, this is kind of weird. This is interesting. That we need to beat Russia. Are you out of your fucking mind?
Right.
Are you serious? Do you know how big that place is? Do you know how much military force is behind Putin? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Like, what if he just decides to go nuclear at any point in time? If he gets pressured, you keep advancing further and further into Russia, and he's like, I'll just end this right now. I'll just turn Kiev into a fucking sandbox. Boom.
Yeah.
And then what do we do?
No, it's insane. And the hardest part, I'm sure you have these people in your life too, but let's just take my parents for a second.
Okay.
My parents are good people, lifelong Democrats. They live in L.A., surrounded by Hollywood types. They cannot seem to grasp the fact that the party that they believed in is now doing the inverse of everything they signed up for.
Exactly.
Because the New York Times rephrases everything so it seems like the values are still there.
Right, which is wild.
It's crazy. And if you're not a New York Times reader, you can barely figure out what these people are talking about.
Did you see the article that I posted on my Instagram that's a title of a New York Times article for today?
Which one?
Jamie, pull this up. I want Bret to see this so you know this is real. This isn't the Babylon Bee. This is an actual New York Times article. You see it?
Yeah, I had it in a weird spot. Let me grab from your Instagram.
This is so crazy. It's really hard to believe that someone would print this and the New York Times would say, yeah, we like it. Put it out there.
I'm not quite sure what to expect.
Look at this.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The Constitution is sacred. Is it also dangerous?
Right.
One of the biggest threats to American politics might be the country's founding document. What the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
One of the biggest threats to America's politics might be one of the greatest documents that any country was ever founded on, if not the greatest ever.
Mm-hmm.
That could be a threat to America's politics. What politics are we talking about? Like, what? How could you possibly gaslight me enough to go along with you on this?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, it's on the one hand completely predictable, right?
Right.
Because there's obviously an authoritarian force there that just grinds its teeth at night over the Constitution and the fact that it prevents it from doing things that it just wants to do last week, And so, of course, they're like scratching their heads like, can we come up with an argument for why it might be time to get rid of that thing? And of course, if you're a normal thinking person, this is complete insanity. But if you're a New York Times reader, I'm sure that fits with the kind of ethos that's been cultivated.
Well, this is why a person like Trump is so important to them. Because if you don't have someone that is an imminent threat on the horizon in 3 months, it's very difficult to justify all this shit. So if you have Kamala Harris and she's competing against Ron DeSantis, if it's just Kamala Harris and Ron DeSantis and Trump doesn't exist, maybe he died. Maybe he died in the last few years,
Mm-hmm.
How could you wouldn't be able to make that argument? You wouldn't. There's no imminent threat.
Right.
Right. Let's say Mitt Romney. Let's say someone even more moderate as a Republican, even more palatable. You can't make that. You can't make that argument that we can't have a First Amendment because the First Amendment is getting in the way. The First Amendment is allowing people to say things that aren't true, misinformation and disinformation, and we're right here. We're September 2nd. I think yesterday was the first day where Brazil banned Twitter.
I know.
So X is illegal to have in Brazil as of today, as of yesterday. And not only is it illegal, but you go through it through a VPN and they will charge you $8,000 a day.
I know. It's incredible that we are watching this.
Insane.
But I would remind you, they did pull this stuff when it was Mitt Romney when it was George W. Bush, right? The rhetoric was still existential threat, right? And they always have particular versions of this, right?
Not as ramped up as this
Right.
is,
Oh,
though. This is like Hitler talk.
No,
This isn't. They never talked about Mitt Romney like he was Hitler.
I agree. And as I've been saying since the beginning of this electoral cycle, they fear Bobby Kennedy far more than they fear Trump, because actually Trump gives them the only argument for their existence that is functional, right? They don't have an affirmative argument for why they should be in power. But being the alternative to Trump is, that's a pitch.
Right.
So we are now somewhere pretty interesting in the sense that I think, to the faithful, that argument still works. But to a larger and larger group of people, they're seeing right through it.
Yeah.
They're understanding. First of all, we lived through 4 years of Trump, right?
Right.
There were good aspects. There were bad aspects. But, it was not distinguished as some moment of, total failure of our system or something.
Right.
There were a lot of elements of it that were very positive.
Right. That's where a fun meme is. There's a fun meme that someone made about how you're telling me that he's going to do these things that he didn't when he was in office, and you're telling me that you're going to do these things that you didn't do and you're in office now.
Right.
Like, what?
And add to that, you're doing the things that you're accusing him of intending to do, right?
Yeah.
All this lawfare stuff, that's frightening. They're weaponizing the courts.
Yeah, and they're weaponizing the courts over what was a misdemeanor with that's already. If you look at the like Bill Ackman had a post that he made on Twitter laying out the legality of this 34 count thing that they convicted him of. That this is essentially an accounting error or deception that's a misdemeanor that is past the statute of limitations.
Not only that, but I don't think you have to really even squint at it to see that it's just simply unconstitutional to point the courts at particular people and not other people.
Right.
We have a constitutional right to equal protection under the law, and obviously they are setting a different standard for Trump because they want to keep him tied up in court. Maybe they want to lock him up and put him in prison. But whatever they're doing is un-American. It is anti-American.
And very dangerous because you've set a precedent now. Now let's imagine, like, we've gone through shifts in this country where we leaned heavily left, like during the Carter administration, it was run by serious lefty, and then what if now it is run by a hardcore right-winger? What if there's some sort of an attack on American soil and it ramps up patriotism and people get real angry and right? Just like the left has moved so far left that if you're not in favor of hormone blockers for kids, somehow you're transphobic and you're a bigot. Like somehow or another, if you're not in favor of that, you're a bigot. What if it gets so right that if you're not in favor of, stops and frisks all over the country for everyone, then somehow or another you're anti-safety of the nation. And if you're not in favor of no-knock raids on people's homes with no warrants, that somehow or another you're a danger to our democracy. Like, it can go really creepy far right, just like it's really creepy far left. And then they're utilizing the courts. If they fill the courts up with a bunch of hardcore Republicans, now you're utilizing the courts against people in a way that you would find very offensive because you've set a precedent.
Right. And I think actually we are already living this nightmare in one way, because what they did was loaded powers into the executive branch that were never supposed to be there. They created emperor-like discretion. And they gave those powers to the president, I think believing that they would never be in the hands of anybody that wasn't on their team, right? And I'm not talking red or blue.
Right.
I'm talking about inside versus outside. And one of the reasons that I think the reaction to Trump is what it was is that he was taking over an office that had been given all of these exotic tools that he could in principle use against anybody. These are tools that are absolutely a violation of our Constitution, and yet they exist there. And so the need to prevent him from having access to those things was existential in their mind. And So anyway, the point is they created tools they never expected to be in the hands of someone else, and that is the situation. That's the scenario you're describing here as well.